Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, and all of you are the co hosts as we talk about all things tabletop role playing game themed. And we are going through a Monster Mayhem series where we find things that allow us to be creatively inspired when it comes to using our monsters and our adversaries in our tabletop role playing games. And this time we're using the concept of insects. Now, this is a combination of origin and motivation. And today, we're going to use insects as our overall umbrella, our theme, as you will, to come up with a lot of ideas for player characters and adversaries and shaping a world, because essentially this entire show is about world building, and I thought we'd talk about it. Now, let me begin this by saying that we are talking about role playing games, which means that many of you out there are might be scientifically minded. Maybe some of you are going to feel like, well, what you're talking about really aren't insects, they're arachnids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking about role playing games, we're talking about fantasy. So let it be known that we are not trying to be scientifically accurate. What we're trying to do, what we are going to do, is find the thematic elements of real life insects and maybe some science fiction insects as well, as many that are taken from the history of Dungeons and Dragons, some of which were actually ideas were made from, admittedly by Gygax and the rest of that group, from toys that they got from overseas. So they took elements from that, and we're going to use that to build. So this isn't real life science. Despite the fact that I think many of you are probably going to be rubbed the wrong way. So I'm letting you know that up front. All right, so hey, what's going on there, guys? I'm glad to have you all here. Thank you so much for being here so early. If you are stateside, and those of you from around the world. Now, let me begin this by saying that also that because we're taking something thematic, we are not going to constrain ourselves by only having insects that only act in a way that insects do. So in other words, what I'm saying is that one of the things that comes to mind are like hive mindedness, like say the Borg, or there are things that there are activities that insects perform that we know that they do in nature, but we might want to modify them and change them, making them a little bit more arcane, more legendary, come up with some ideas. Maybe there might be even we might come up with a race of insects like the thrycreen that still have a humanity to them or a society to them that's extrapolated out of base insect behavior. So absolutely. Yeah, exactly, Dead Man. Like Dead Man said, lobsters are basically insects. Exactly. And sure, I know the scientific minded of you out there are going like, well, they're not exactly. And I'm thinking, well, yes. So we are going to include arachnids. I understand. I get it. But we're going to include arachnids in this group, because we're using this from the point of view of, say, the commoner and the collective behavior of what your base individual considers a pest, and actually some of the good things that insects have with them. As a matter of fact, I've got a couple of things. Some information here, some of which was spawned by the fact that people responded on Facebook and said, "Hey, here, you're absolutely right there, Tesla." Tesla Ranger's like, "Yeah, somewhere an entomologist is crying." I get it, but listen, how about turning this positive and considering this show to be a gateway drug for the real sciences? Because let me tell you. I don't do much research. You guys know that I'm an armchair guy. It's you guys that are co-hosts that make me look brilliant. but every once in a while, I'll use my Google foo, and I start typing in some search, uh, themes or whatever, and it's extremely easy to go down a rabbit hole when it comes to things like this, and no doubt this happened as well. Wayne mentions, "Morning, heads up, I'm a chowderhead. Skipping the science is good by me." Yeah, and listen, we are a tabletop role playing game creative group, so we're here getting ideas, and I mean, is the Tarask, despite the fact that it is tangentially a lizard like creature, could someone really reconceive of that thing being like a giant insect or a beetle or something like that? The answer to that is hell's yes. All right, so what are let's get some commonalities with when it comes to insects. So one of the things that I found out, uh, as according to Wikipedia, and I'm not going to try to go down this rabbit hole too much, but I wanted to pull out some highlights, and there are some commonalities, at least as according to Wikipedia, that many insects have together, and you're going to hear the word "some" a lot because there's always an exception to these rules, but uh, Wikipedia mentions that nearly all insects hatch from eggs. Insects' growth is constrained by an inelastic exoskeleton, and development involves a series of molts. Essentially, they have instead of having bones on the inside, their exoskeleton is on the outside, the harder portion of their bodies, and they have to release that. I'm gonna, for lack of a better word, the exoskeleton, the shell, uh, molts off of them, sheds essentially, and then they grow. They can grow bigger as a shell grows underneath them. So the first thing that comes to my mind are, hell, we need some eggs, which is kind of cool to throw around your game setting, and maybe some the insect shells that are left. Like, what is it? We're going through a period with the cicadas, and while Ohio's not really big with the cicada thing, I've seen some cicada shells, from the or shells. I don't know, dead cicadas and whatnot. And I think many of us have seen dead insects. The fly that tries to get out the window, and 5 days later it's dead on the windowsill or something like that. Anyway, moving on. Immature stages often differ from adults in structure, habit, and habitat, and can include a passive pulpal stage in groups that undergo four-stage metamorphosis. And so, a classic one would be the difference between, you have eggs, you have maggots, and then you have flies. And if we really wanted to, because if you want to gamify it, we can find stat blocks and descriptors to go like, okay, well, this is a 1.5 CR, larval stage, and then this one is a CR3. I don't know, crawling stage, and then this was a CR8 flying stage or something like that. And this, in many ways, instead of just going like, okay, the PCs are going to just be attacked by proverbial ants, maybe these insects go through a particular stage, and might be a good way to, we I always promote this. We need tension timers. We all need tension timers. And anything to get the PCs moving and get rid of that analysis paralysis. Um, yeah, Cam, I hear you. I hear you. Cam's the first one to throw a shot like, crustaceans are not insects, folding arms and pouting. I I know, I know. Just I please. Please don't at me. Hey, Red Dice, what's going on? Um, all right, so we do have a number of stages in insects' lives, but here's some other things. That this is something actually I did not know. Adult insects typically move about by walking, flying, or sometimes swimming. Um, as it allows for rapid yet stable movement, many insects adopt a tripedal gait. This, I don't know how you would gamify this, but I love this idea. In which they walk with their legs touching the ground in alternating triangles, composed of the front and rear on one side, with the middle on the other side. And so I like that because, anyways, the idea that I was like, I never thought about that. Actually, centipedes. If you take a look at like centipedes and millipedes and whatnot, they walk in multiple triangles across their bodies. Insects are the only invertebrates that have evolved flight, and all flying insects derive from one common ancestors. Many insects spend at least part of their lives underwater, with larval adaptations that include gills, and some adult insects are aquatic and have adaptations for swimming, which I never really considered. And which this could lead to some other things you can add into your adventure, especially if it's like there's an overrun of insects. Maybe I'm going to go here. I'm going to, the biblical locusts destroying crops, and the PCs have to go into it, and you want to have this multi-level adventure where the backdrop are these insects devastating the landscape. And then you might go, well, how do I include like an aquatic adventure? And maybe like there's eggs underwater, or maybe there's a stage of the insects that might be underwater or something like that. And I think that might be anyway, it's a tool to put in the back pocket. That's what I'm thinking of. Some species, such as water striders, are capable of walking on the surface of water. Insects are mostly solitary, but some, such as certain bees, ants, and termites, are social and live in large, well-organized colonies. I, for some reason, I just gather that there's a lot more social insects than this article seems, but maybe it's just because all the social insects are gathered together. So psychologically, I'm thinking that there's far more insects that gather in large groups than are solitary. Like spiders come across as solitary. I know they're arachnids, easy. But when I think of flies, let's think of swarms of them, or ants. I think of swarms of them. But yeah, humans regard certain insects as pests, attempt to control them using insecticides. I think it would be pretty awesome to have village people, the PCs arrive and they're like, we're heroes, we need to solve your problem. And they're like, nah, we got this under control. And they're like using insecticides to keep the insects from completely destroying their city or something. Some insects damage crops by feeding on sap, leaves, fruits, or wood. Some species are parasitic and may vector diseases. Some insects perform complex ecological roles. Blowflies, for example, help consume carrion, but also spread diseases. Insect pollinators are essential to the life cycle of many flowering plants, on which most organisms, including humans, are at least partially dependent. Without them, the terrestrial portion of the biosphere would be devastated. Many insects are considered ecologically beneficial as predators, and a few provide economic benefit. Of course, getting back into the chat, so apologize. Of course, we all know that there are innumerable communities that eat insects, and it becomes a staple part of a food source, as well as the fact that I would even think in science fiction, eating insects for like protein and things in space might be the new thing. Hey, Mike's like, yeah, my horror especially. I'm getting into the chat. I apologize for that. Tesla says that insects are six-legged, two-antenned, two compound-eyed things that make up the largest class in the arthropod phylum and the largest taxonomic group in all the animal kingdom, which tells me that it's possible that maybe your players never meet the same insects twice. If you really wanted to go down that path. Ushimitsu Suduki. I'm going to butcher your name. That's why I call you Ushi. There could be a tremor sense connection with the gate. Walk without rhythm, or you'll attract the worm. Ooh, maybe the players need to use insects as mounts if they are like riding. Maybe there's a community that rides on like centipedes or some other kind of beetles. The classic Dungeons and Dragons fire beetles. I believe there's rhino beetles and things like that, and so that they don't walk on the ground. I like that idea. I mean, especially through maybe scorpion riders in a desert, or water striders through a swampy area or something like that. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, Tesla says a very common colloquial term for insects in general is bugs, whereas actual bugs are insects in the order uh, Hemiptera. Don't go too far down the science hole because I'm going to butcher it all. Um, Mufa says crustacean. Here we go with the. I didn't know there was a crustacean faction, but crustaceans are just insects that stayed underwater. Mm-mm. Hey, what's up, Gribel? Gribel says I use metamorphosis in some monsters. The carrion crawler is the larva, and depending on what it eats, they evolve into umber hulks, spider eaters, chulls, or other insect-related monsters. I love that idea, and I not only do I want to embrace that idea for going past insects, where the players in the beginning might very easily get rid of a particular monster, but the fact that they can grow to other things, and if the problem isn't solved, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And I like I said, I love tension timers and anything that allows us to tell the player characters the thing that you need to stop now. You might not need to be able to hitting it about the head and shoulders might not be the smartest thing. Maybe they need to lead the insect swarm away, or remove or change its food source, or find the one alchemist that can come up with an insecticide, or go after the queen and have to kill the queen, or capture the queen and move the queen so that all the insects leave the hive that they've created outside the city, or something of that nature. I really like that. Mike Gould says, and of course, the newest addition, the ghoul fly and maggot, which is where this idea came from, and using it as a using it as a uh, story prompt is really what happened. Bringing up the idea of like things, you, you know. Insects burrowing in someone's head to mind control them, because that's how your charm person or command or hypnotic spell works, or um, normal human beings that have been invaded by insects inside of their bodies, and at any particular moment an innocent person is going to chest burst or something like that, and a swarm of insects are going to come out of their nose and their mouth and their eyes in the middle of eating dinner or something, and the PCs don't know, including one of themselves, that has been bitten by a particular insect, and they don't know when they're going to explode and be eaten from the inside out or something like that. Red Dice says, as soon as insects were mentioned in D&D, I instantly thought the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. I saw that. I saw a movie about that. Ugh. But yeah, absolutely. Insects, I think, as a narrative basis for the capabilities of like a lot of your adversaries, I think works really well as well. Like, could you imagine maybe maybe a monster casts a spell, like any poisons, acids, ranged attacks, magic missiles or something can look like and appear as insects. If you really want to ramp up the action economy, you could have some of your bad guys carry around or be infected by or possess a swarm of insects. I once had a city besieged by uh, it was a technically it was a madman walking around with a sack, and the sack was filled with nothing but swarms of insects and other monsters. It was like rats and bugs were crawling all over his body and stuff. And when the PCs would try to attack him, yet more swarms would come out of him, and his body would disappear, like would explode in a bunch of like insects, and he would scramble away, and they were all trying to like kill it, and it would reform again, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Mm-mm-mm. I love it. Let's see. Dead Man brings up uh, Mothra was a giant moth. Megalon was a giant rhinoceros beetle. Uh, Kumanga was a giant spider. Uh, Kamakarus was a giant mantis. Demiking was a giant snail. And Megagurius, Muto, Abathor for 3 mutants are all insectoid kaiju. And, let's come on, let's be honest. We don't really, unless they're like ladybugs or something, we really don't have too many feelings when insects are like punished because they don't look cute. Maybe that's wrong of us, but there's a little bit of the like the moral and ethical like we just like to see them explode. And there's nothing greater than a giant robot ripping apart a kaiju and having like the spurty organs on the inside, coming out of it all on fire, or a big laser sword, slicing another kaiju open or something like that. There's something satisfying, and in many ways, it allows our inner child to not feel guilty. Let's put it that way. Michael says, "I got the idea from the Constantine movie about the intelligent swarm." Yeah, I forgot. I also have a sentient swarm called a mind hive. The swarm takes a humanoid shape and acts as a spy for Ves Vespridroi, the Vespridroi. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, and if not, I like the way I pronounced it. Mm-mm-mm. Sorry, I'm going back up into the chat. Yeah. Red Dice Diary says, "Yeah, the thing that makes me laugh with people being squeamish, eating insects, and yet will happily chow down on shrimp." Yep, I'm a hypocrite. I'm exactly the same way. Shrimp and another culinary delight would be crawfish. Crawfish is a great one about biting off the head and ripping it apart and sucking out the head and all that business. Yeah, I'm into all that. I'm into all of that. Red Dice says the ecology information for Cloverfield monster and the various parasitic insects that come off is pretty interesting. It can add a lot of depth to your campaign by thinking about these relationships. I love the idea of okay. Side note, write this down and put this in your toolbook, GMs out there and dungeon masters everywhere. It, Action economy is very important. Having one monster fight a large group of player characters often ends in disappointment for the dungeon master because players, say 4 players, has at least 8 actions, if not more, versus your one monster. So one way to equalize or even overwhelm the PCs with action economy is to add other things that your big bad has in terms of their actions. And one great way with insects is to have, say, giant, bigger insects surrounded by or maybe carrying around smaller insects. So you could have a giant spider who on its back, and I believe there are, but I know that relax. I know spiders and maybe there's other things like carrion crawlers, cave fishers, ankhegs, and things like that. Maybe they are carrying around eggs or larvae or something like that on their backs that become even worse. So you could have giant insects and then add on top of the battlefield swarms of insects, and then you might even add even other things on there like little lieutenant insects that are running around. And mind you, there's nothing stopping us. If you took a stat block and just erased all the names of it, you can come up with so many other things by just making them insectoid, right? Like, why couldn't a hag instead be like the one of the antagonists from, I forget which Men in Black movie. It might have been the first one. Egger, who was wearing the Egger suit, the alien insect that was basically wearing wearing a human skin, and periodically would extend like a claw or some kind of thing outside of its body as an insect or something. So why couldn't that just be reskin that as a hag or a naga or something, or maybe a sphinx and just call it an insect and whatnot. Um, and of course, relabeling all the special abilities, going back to the insect burrowing into someone's ear or being attached to the back of someone's neck, and those are your zombies, but it's really just insects that have been drinking people's brains like a Slurpee, and at the same time piloting their bodies from the back of their heads and whatnot. And also the idea that any innocent person could explode into uh, an enemy. You know what I mean? I love that kind of stuff. Wayne says, insect horror. PCs encounter very friendly village, aligned with their gods and thinking, etc. Discovered entire village is a hybrid minded, each controlled by nesting insects underground. Hell yes. Yes, all that, yes. And when the player characters are like, how did they know we could do certain things or whatever? And you explain to them, yeah, maybe it was a hive mind. Like, remember you walked into town and you spoke to like 7 different NPCs? Yeah, they were all the bad guy. They were all absolutely the same one. Oh man. Mike Gould says, here's a tip for those who complain that dragons or dragonborn, etc., aren't stompy enough. Give the dragon a different breath weapon, a massive swarm. Yeah. Ugh, breathing out swarms of insects. Oh, how disgusting. I love it. Because to me, insects border on body horror. Because I know there's some people that just get freaked out by the idea of insects on their bodies, which that doesn't freak me out. The thing that freaks me out is like th- the fact that insects use us as a vector for other things like mosquitoes and botflies and all that kind of business. Because what a great not side quest, but insects aren't mindless, but they may not consider humanity in what they're trying to do. So, for example, maybe there is a community now lives in the path of insects migrating from one place to another, and the fact that they are disassembling people's homes and eating their crops, and maybe they have zero interest in hurting people, but the side effect of them consuming food or building a hive or something is affecting humanity. And I like that idea of like maybe they aren't bad and they aren't evil and they're not trying to consume people. Maybe they're just they keep coming in and taking pieces of their furniture and their rooftops and stuff. And every time someone tries to stop them, they get attacked. But other than that, they're like, Dad, I'm hungry. Take down a couple of cows, eat half a wagon wheel, and whatever. Oh yeah. Anyway, for my co-host here, Michael says there's an adventure in an old horror game called Beyond the Supernatural where there was an insectoid like Men in Black that inhabited other people's skins. The paranoia element was huge. Yeah. None of us, we human beings, I think, along with snakes and other larger predators, insects are another thing that has always boggled our minds, and I think that's why we have such a fascination with the body horror of insects in general. Like what was it, the movie The Fly? The Brundle fly and whatnot. Pretty that would be a pretty interesting thing to do. Wayne says, I had an old PC that had a wondrous what is it figurine of wondrous power fly, and I love that thing. I was just obsessed with it. Oh man, it was a great time. Wayne says freeing villagers from mind control also means discovering they are actually opposed to the PC's gods and values, basically bad people. Ooh, hey people, we freed you. And all the people were just like, huh, hmm, never liked you in the first place. They're like, wait, what? Wait, what? Vampanoid says insect swarm breath sounds great for an undead dragon. How do you know that the insects didn't make the dragon undead in the first place? Huh? Huh? You ever consider that? I mean, we already have yellow musk creeper as a concept, right? A non nec- necromantic origin for zombies. Why can't you just make them insectoid? And there's other things too, like a warlock patron as an insect instead of say reskinning those elder gods or something. I think dragons are a really great way to reskin insects as well. Using them as a kind of a stat blocky kind of thing, especially like dragonflies and some of the other insects writ large. I think works very well. And if you really want to go very alien, insects and Cthulhuidish um, thinking, I think also goes hand in hand, like the Umber Hulk. I have a list of classic D&D insectoid creatures. I'm going to go through those in a minute, but let me see what my co-hosts have to say. Mike Gould says, I've run an aliens adventure with Ankheg. I reskinned giant centipedes as Ankheg nymphs. Then there were Ankheg soldiers, and the Ankheg queen was a reskinned black dragon. Exactly. I didn't even read that comment first, but we're always on the same page, guys. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Hmm. Um, let's see. Red Dice is like, I'm flashing back to the film Evolution. Take the leg, take the leg. Yeah, you could really not. This isn't a game thing, but mechanically, if you divided some of the hit points into its limbs, you could have players who are like, okay, I could attack the body, but it's mandibles, spitting acid, or webbing, or adhesive, or slippery surface, or poison, or something, and then players that want to disable the insects might, maybe each leg is 20 hit points, and if they take out at least 3 legs, they can stop it, or destroys its claws or mandibles or something, like pokes out its eye and whatnot. uh, yeah, things like that. I love that idea. Gribel says a huge dragon carrying their young in their body, like a scorpion does. You see a huge thing flying, and suddenly dozens of smaller dragons fly off of her. Ugh. You know how the classic dragon blotting out the sun, and you see this big insect, maybe they hear it from miles away, and you're and the PCs are like, great, we're just gonna go Nova on the one insect, and all of a sudden it just like all they see is shadows just coming out of it, and just you just see this swarm, and then they realize it's so high in the air that those swarms aren't little tiny bugs. Each swarm is like something like 5 times the size of their own body, and they're like, mother father, you know. Oh man, I'm getting down here. Zombie dragon. Ooh, I'm sorry about that. I saw that. Zombie dragon full of maggots. Now here's something else that is a little thing you can throw into, I think, into an encounter. Oftentimes, player characters walk along, they see enemy, attack happens. Oh, I got you, Mike. I got you. Don't relax, guys. I see all the I see all the comments, so I'm going to get to it. But PCs walk along, they see an encounter. Encounter happens. Let's pick an owlbear, right? So PCs come along, owlbear turns corner, roll initiative, big fight. But oftentimes one thing to make your world come alive is to act as if the world is happening when the PCs are not there, so that when the player characters come into it, things are happening. For example, creatures that are diseased, wounded, scared, eating, frightened, creating a nest. And one thing is, okay, player comes along, giant dragon or something that's dead, and inside of it, or it's dying, one eye blinded or something, and it's got a big wound on its side and it's spilling out maggots, and it comes across the player characters, and of course, half wounded, half dead player characters kill dragon, except it's also got inside of it like maggots and whatnot. And then it brings up a question of investigation, like, a, what did this dragon eat to make such a thing happen? And wow. I hear you there. um Oops. Oh, sorry. Got to go back to sorry. Other comment. Mike says, "Of I've had a hag who specialized in insects. She flew around in a gargantuan undead beetle surrounded by a storm cloud-sized swarm of insects." Ow! And you know what? You'd be surprised. Honestly, the majority of like character class abilities and spells are actually pretty easy to retheme as insect-like. That pretty damn easy. If you just give it a little bit of thought, you're like, wow, mage hand. Maybe the mage hand is just a big insect that goes and flies and picks things up. How about my cure wounds spell? Maybe my cleric is pretty horrific and dumps like maggots onto people's wounds and stitches wounds closed by using reaching into their robe and pulling out little ant heads that like are like sutures or something that like stick the wounds together, or like suck out the poison from putting the leeches kind of maggots onto anyway. There's so many different ways. Of course, like I said, the mind control part of it, darkness. Maybe your darkness spell isn't darkness, but it's such a thick blanket of insects flying around that it literally blocks sight. The fog spell is very easy to make that as a blanket of insects flying around or something like that. The grease spell could be scarab beetles running underfoot, making people trip and fall. So on and so forth. I mean, you could keep going on and on and on. Mike says, combine the two. A dragon infected by a ghoul fly now breathes swarms of ghoul flies. There's your big bad evil guy. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, oh man, Tesla's like owlbear, not a bugbear. You're slipping, DBJ. Seriously, dude. And I literally missed that one. I missed it so hard. I'm so sorry. Yeah, bugbears. Who? You know what? Who's to say? All right, I'm gonna take. I'll take your sarcasm and meet you in the middle and go. How do we know that the interior gut of a bugbear isn't called a bugbear? Because when bugbears die, it's like a feed. It's almost as if their insides have they like grow insects inside of them. And when they're young, they actually eat insects that still live inside of their gut, and so people don't like to kill bugbears or they have to dispose of the bodies in a particular way because it just they just become a haven for insects, and that's why we call them bugbears. That's why we don't call them goblins or hobgoblins. We call them something else. I don't know. That's just that came out of my ass, but maybe. Um, oh man, I hear you, Greiber. Anyway, Red Dice says in our last old school essential session, the players explored a strange bio dungeon. Tendrils took the head of their hirelings. The dungeon then became active as they fled, rising up out of the ground as a huge insect. I love living dungeons. There's something classic about the idea of like running around on the inside of something that's alive, like a hive itself. I love it. Uh, yeah, Mike says I have a homebrew sorcerer origin too. The Swarm. Oh, thank you. Sorceress origins. Heck, maybe there's a player character is or like druids fit into this category where they are friends of insects, but everyone's just like, oh, that's pretty disgusting. I think you could even go so far as to make a monk that's related to insects, where like I forget what the version of the shadow monk, and their face is covered and whatnot, but when they pull the mask back, it goes very Mortal Kombat, where like insects leave out of their mouth or their body. Or hey, what does my Misty Step look like? My clothes fall to the ground as insects, just my body transforms into insects that scatter everywhere, and then somewhere else those insects gather together, and that's where my body forms or something. You could reskin damn near anything. Exactly. Exactly, Tesla mantis style kung fu. What is it? 7-star mantis and um northern and southern mantis, two different martial arts styles. Some classic movies from that era, by the way. Greibel says hideous laughter equals hideous screaming because a wasp is flying around you. Yeah, yeah. I love it. Heck, my character has uh temporary hit points, and it becomes an insect's shell or something around me or whatever. Um, ooh, yep, gaseous form. Yep. What is that? Gaseous form could be a swarm of flies. Yeah, exactly. Hell's yes. Hell's yes. All right. I'm gonna get out of the chat for just two couple of seconds here, but Red Dice says I mercilessly ripped off the idea for shadow ships from Babylon 5, where the creature is inactive until it can slurp the brain of a humanoid to use as its CPU. Uh, it, doppelgangers reskinned as insects with the skin wearing. Yeah, vampires. Vampires are easily reskinned as a insectoid kind of thing. very easily. Going into our going into the Discord. God, there's this whole ton of images you dropped in here. Anyway, going into our Discord server, there is a there's a centipede that is huge, and it actually is so large it can take down small mammals and whatnot. It's pretty bad. There's even an image of in our Discord server, scorpions carry their young on their back, giant scorpion plus swarm. Hells yes. And even whereas this Tesla puts it, in East Africa, army ants are used as natural sutures. The ants' jaws are so powerful, the natives use them to staple wounds together by forcing them to bite them and then break off their bodies. Thank you. Exactly. Exactly. And this was brought up in this was brought up on Facebook. Joseph Keenan mentions that he says forget whose city it was, late classical Maya or middle to late Aztecs. One city became a major Mesoamerican trade route because of the insects used to make red dyes. There are a few insect dyes like that were very super valuable. Not technically an insect, but silkworms too. Product branding of the worm is mezcal. And someone else, John DeNorker, mentions this sounds great. I ran an adventure inside an ant hill with ant larvae. Let's see if I can pronounce all this. Nanitics, workers, soldiers, alates, repletes, and a queen. A player said, "I learned so much about ants, and my heart bursts with joy." That's an awesome kind of thing. I mean, there's a ton of that kind of stuff, and for those who are part of the show and trying to get some insect ideas, here are some classic monsters. Going starting at the bottom level, CR level, we got rust monsters, crawl warrior, ankhegs, ettercaps, cave fishers, phase spiders, flying horrors, umber hulks, driders. Come on, driders, the remoraz, which I think is, I wish we had more remoraziousness in monsters. Purple worms, if you want to include something that eats insects, skittering horrors, frost worms, and if you want to modulate the ramping up and reducing down the dangers, insects eat other insects. Spiders eat flies, right? Things fall into the spider's web, and one insect eats another. So that might lead to a number of things, especially if the players are like, "Hey, you want to hand out some magic items? Sure. See if you can find it down in that in that massive swarm of insects or something." You know, two words: Ettercap vampire. I honestly, I think the two fit together. I mean, first of all, you could just reskin a vampire as an Ettercap itself, right? Just take out the name and put something else in there, and remove bats and wolves and replace that with something else. You know, right? Yeah. Greibel mentions paladin who uses insects, immune to fear because, bug mine. Lay on hands are ants that suture wounds. Smite is a swarm infested weapon. Immune to disease because bacteria, and rides a giant fly. I'm gonna give you a slow clap on that one. I I would so be into that if someone's like, I want to make a paladin that is bug insect related. That's so nasty. Could you imagine a smite where like the PC has a maybe a weapon that looks like half a mandible or something, and like slashes someone, and what's left in the wound are like other insects or maggots or whatever? That would be awesome. I love. I just love the concept of that. I love it. You get that. I'm gonna give you that one. Mike says related to insects and actual historical fact, honey was used not only as a food product but as an antiseptic for wounds. The ant head suture combined with a honey seal would actually work to heal. That was you. Um. Yes, I've heard that putting um a family pet that receives an open wound, that using honey can not only seal the wound and keep it antiseptic, basically sealing it away from bacteria from the outside. But also, if your pet licks the wound, it won't hurt them. Um, Honey is one of the few biological byproducts that does not it does not spoil. So honey will crystallize. You heat it back up again, and it turns right back into honey, no matter how long it's been. From what I understand, and yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I what great, like, for people that are like, well, why would I bother adventuring to fight insects? Why would I just avoid them? There's a lot of byproducts. There's lizard folk out in the swamps that use beetle carapaces as like shields and use some of their limbs as weapons. The honey as a byproduct. The eating of insects. Maybe those lizard folk eat the insects when they're like hand sized, kind of like they're popping them like candies or something. But that's because if they stopped eating them, they would grow like 50 feet long or whatever. Uh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. The weary warlord says, "Ever see the mummy?" Yep, yep. Scarabs and all that kind of stuff. Well, as the weary warlord mentions, the movie The Mummy. You throw a mummy into your group. You got a mummy lord. You've got scarabs running around, insects and beetles and scorpions running around everywhere. To add to the danger, and you could even reskin some non-biological hazards as being insect created, right? Like hallways with webs around them so that the PCs get pushed into the webs to be entangled while they're fighting their enemies. That pit trap is basically a hole in the ground with a big insectoid mandible, like a Umber Hulk's face or something at the bottom of it. Or there's insects can make noises that are just as loud as jet engines. Maybe that becomes so deafening that PCs can't hear each other. Maybe it's so deafening it acts as the silence spell. Right, it's so loud you just hear so many things that the PCs can't communicate. Maybe that ogre that you mind controlled can't hear your instructions. Those verbal components can't come out because you can't even hear your own self speak. Although I would let somebody do that. Maybe that's the wrong way to do that, but whatever. Um, um, the weary warlord mentions again. Insect smite would be scarabs appearing beneath their skin. Seems good. Hell yeah, yeah. Your paladin like slices somebody across the arm, and they're like, "Huh, didn't do anything," and all of a sudden, use this beetle head starts like beetles start punching their way off the person's skin, and the person's like, "Oh my god, mother, what did you do to me?" Yeah, oh man, I love it. I absolutely love it. The Red Dice Diary says the supplement Stygian library has bees that have been feeding on ink in an extra dimensional library, and they produce dark honey with strange effects. You can, um, from what I understand, flowers placed specific flowers placed near beehives produce different flavors and colors of honey, if I'm not mistaken. That would be pretty interesting for druid slash wizardry slash hags who are using bees to create a honey, essentially doing alchemy by having certain breeds of flowers. Like, what are some dangerous, monstrous plants out there? Could you imagine those dangerous plants are being pollinated with these giant insects and bees to do other things? That what a biosphere that would be. That would be pretty awesome, I believe, as well. Um, let's see. Mike says, I believe royal jelly is high in antioxidants as well. Wines are made out of honey. So many great things. So many great things. Mike's also says, well, people would hunt insects for numerous reasons. Things like ants are edible as a high source of protein. Yep, and sugar. There's shell-based dyes, honey, carapace armor, and weapons poison. What is it? The uh, why am I not thinking beeswax and lac wax? Yes, beeswax. is literally a waxed caused by that. And yes, absolutely, inks are very important. I mean, if a noble says like, "Hey, we need inks for our communications," and you've got to go get these, you know, get the beetles and kill them and stomp them down or whatever. I don't know how you turn that stuff into ink, but I'm pretty sure it's probably pretty horrible. Um, yeah, Red Dice says, yeah, that's right. Lavender honey is a big thing. Um, the Weary Warlord. It's funny. It's so funny because side note. I know you guys can see this on the side, but Weary Warlord's over in Twitch, and whenever you put up an emoji, it it appears through Restream and recontextualizes as the verbalization of what it is pretty funny. Anyway, says their face when the bump under their skin is moving towards their crotch. Get it out! Yeah, get it out! Paladin is like, that's what you deserve. Oh man. What is this? I haven't. Gribel says Geisha cicada mantis. She lives in a tree for 17 years, then adopts the form of a beautiful woman, attracts prey with his music, charms them, eats his head, evolves, and lays eggs in trees around, only to spawn more of them, I'm sure. That is awesome. I love that. The larval stage of an insect is a charming, beautiful person. Here's another one to reskin. Reskin classic harpies. The nasty headed faced, charming sound. Nasty bird flapping things. They could be insects that make a sound that is attractive to human beings, and they're like, and they hear something, and the human being, instead of seeing the insect, there's some insects that the back of the carapace looks like something else, like tiger beetles and fire beetles and skull's head beetles or something. There's spiders that are the same way. Arachnids, where their back, of course, we know the black widow has that hourglass shape on the back of it. I could see insects having something on their back that looks enticing to us. Either it could be very arcane, it could be like a rune symbol that ends up showing us something like the face of one of our loved ones, or maybe it's just pretty nasty. Maybe the beetles or insects rise up, and on their chest is a human being that looks very attractive, and the beetle could care less what it looks like. It's just used to attract an enemy. But to us, we're like, ooh, aren't they beautiful, and walk towards them. Oh man. Oh yeah, yeah. Ow. The Weary Warlord says, "Have you seen Annihilation? The bear scene." Yeah, if you guys haven't seen Annihilation, that's a creepy movie. Eh, lacking in some areas, but beautifully made. Let me put it that way. And there's a scene with a bear, and anyway, it's hard to describe it because it was so, I don't know, insidious. Oh, yeah, Red Dice Diaries brings up the movie. I'm thinking the film Mimic. Yeah, that's an excellent one. Um, Clover. Dead Man says clover honey is the most valuable due to its sugar content. I know these things are made in factories, but a really common thing I always loved finding is, especially here in the Midwest, when you go to like um, fairs or like these little mom and pop stores. um, they often have these like plastic tubes filled with various types of honey. And you, as a kid, I love them because you take the tube like a straw with the ends pinched, and it would filled with different types of honey, and you just bite a hole in one end and you just drink the honey. And you could also use, of course, you could use the honey in tea, because that's, as an adult, that's what I would do, but I'm still like a big kid anyway. But that was a common thing too. Yeah, the idea of, why didn't this show up? Okay. You guys are talking about insects that charm people, like um Sudoki says, species the movie. Yep, insectoid mimics humans and beautiful female. Yeah. Freaked me out when I think it was the first species movie where she's drowning a dude in the hot tub and she's not even thinking about it. It was just like, whatever, just trying to breed. Gribel says beetle with a sack of gold in its bag. It's simple, but it works. Yeah, why not? Yep. Deadman says the Black Widow's hourglass is on the underside of their abdomen. Oh, thank you for well actualing me. Just for some reason I was just thinking of the back, uh, the back of everything, I suppose. But yeah, on the underside, yep, it rears up and you failed your wisdom saving throw. PC's like, no, as the insect gets closer and gets ready to try to feed on its brain matter. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, pretty nasty stuff. But lastly, I will say that insects also make a really great um, triangle of conflict. So let's, for example, let's go with a classic goblinoid horde is out there, or those lizard men I brought up before, or an enemy kingdom, or an evil lich, or whatever, a dragon, and having insects, writ large. Maybe they're both enemies of the enemy of my enemy kind of thing, where the dragon is like, the red dragon's like, seriously, I'm gonna have to move. This is embarrassing because I'm just getting too many insects into my my volcanic haven or something like that. And the PCs are like, we could help you move because we really don't want you here in the first place. I'll grab your stuff. All you gotta do is order pizza. you know Yeah, that's a theme. Like the Weary Warlord says, there's a monster movie about alien women killing men by overexhausting them from sex. Of course it is. Of course. Be like Hive Mind, I think. Yeah, that's a classic thing. Unfortunately, a good way for us to reskin the idea of the proverbial femme fatale Black Widow, because what is it? The Black Widow spider, the mantis, a lot of the feminine, the female version of the insects kills the male after breeding, and that, of course, humanity, we got to translate that in our society and whatnot. As a femme fatale kind of idea, but I think you could do a lot of twists on that. It might be a little sick, but children or elderly or any male, female, and any pronies in between really fit into that as well, just to throw people off because it's the, oh, of course I expect the succubus, reskin succubus, to be an insect or something, and you find out that nope, it was the king, because the king's the one that is very charismatic, maybe not attractive, but maybe he's like Robert Baratheon or something, and everyone's like, oh, this guy's kind of he's kind of charismatic, in a weird kind of way, and then suddenly they're just like, the guy's like, oh, I'm inviting you to my dinner because you're going to be the main course. um, Mike Gould says there's an ancient spider lady monster in Japanese mythology that would be a great change for the Drider, named, I'm going to butcher this, Jorogumo. And there's also in African, Anansi is a parable of a spider and a person, and changes between the two based on the stories. And of course, a lot of they're like children's stories to warn them about, to teach them about proper behavior and to warn them about things. And some of the Anansi stories are really good as well. You could get guys, you could do Google food, get on YouTube or something, and people do stories like that. And I bet there's a Jorogumo stories in Japanese mythology out there too. And I might look that up and listen to some of that today. So thank you for pointing that out there, Mr. Gould. Driders are a big thing. Drider didn't even talk about Driders and the air quotes punishment of Loth. Um, someone mentioned before that why are Driders punished if you're becoming more spider-like, right? And I was like, well, maybe it's always been a lie that you're being punished when really it isn't. Anyway, the Weary Warlord says it's so silly how did anyone take that seriously? Oh, you mean the yeah, yeah, killing men by yeah, I know, but it's we're all 10-year-olds at heart, so yeah. Um, yeah, Mike Gold brings up Anansi is a trickster god. He's basically the African Loki. He's pretty awesome. Yep, yep. Always the stories are always Anansi causing some kind of problem, being funny, like stealing something or tricking someone or trying to navigate a problem in a funny, interesting kind of way. So some of the stories they're pretty cool. I had always thought about trying to do a African mythology kind of series or something. Maybe one of these days. It's going to take some research because honestly, I don't know much, but it does sound pretty cool. The movie Mimic had an insect creature that was man-sized and could look human. Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, the if I'm not mistaken, in the mimic, could didn't it also go through a transformative process? I think it moved from like larva stage to crawling to flying. I don't quite remember it. Mina Sorvino? Remember the actress's name. Anyway, The Weary Warlord, I recommend Beyond Aquila Rift from Love, Death, and Robots. Ooh. Ooh. Beyond Aquila Rift. I'm trying to remember which one that is. Is that that's not the battle arena. There's a battle arena one that I'm thinking of, and there is oh, I'm sorry. I can't think of it right now. I can't think of it. Anyway, can't we could go on and on and on with this one. Um I just want to thank you guys for just there was something I mentioned the other day, and I need to mention it now, and I really should have mentioned it at the top, that I feel very blessed by all of you that watch and comment and participate on the show and all that, because not only are you here and your time is valuable and you're willing to spend it on me, but you all of you are you're bringing the heat every time. Intelligent, funny, sarcastic, silly, educational, and always eternally positive energy. And I can't tell you how proud I am to have this little section of the interwebs for this purpose. And it's because of you guys. So I really appreciate that. I really do. Because we know the interwebs, it could so easily go so wrong, and we have had very little disruption from gawkers and lurkers and bots and negativity and all that kind of business. So I just really appreciate that. Anyway, before we get into Dead Man's last post, I'm going to say Mike Gould says consider a monstrous reskin of something like Ray of Sickness, a gun that shoots maggots. Yeah. All right, weary warlord. He's like positive. What? Everybody start arguing. Oh, man, thanks, guys. Michael says, DBJ, you're the fulcrum of our dialogue. We would not be here without you. I don't know about that. I think there would. Somebody else might fill this space. Just to let you know, I will be having, fingers crossed, a very good interview with a gentleman who has interviewed Walter John Williams, who I hold to my heart because I remember reading Voice of the Whirlwind and Hardwired and in the 80s with Cyberpunk. And to think that I'm going to be interviewed by the same gentleman that interviewed Walter John Williams brings warmth to my heart. Someone reached out to me, a teacher who uses role playing games to educate people, and I will post that link up probably tomorrow, and I'll let you guys know when it will be available. Um, the last episode he interviewed the person that runs Dungeon Musings, and I'll be next. And I love Dungeon Musings. So anyway, thank you very much. Check out Level Up 5e. I know I segued. I always get squirrely. Squirrel. All the time from you guys, but whatever. It's pretty cool. I think that's, I don't know. I just get a warm feeling sometimes when you guys are really positive. So, guys, it's the end of the show. Thank you very much for being here. I know you guys here. Those of us on the in the states and thereof in our time period is between, what is it, 4 to 7 in the morning. It's crazy. So thank you so much for being here. Unless my dulcet tones are putting you to sleep, which, 5 out of 4 doctors do say that listening to this show does help with that. Those of you overseas, thank you so much as well for just embracing the show. I really appreciate it. And lastly, again, go over to levelup5e.com. I was a contributing writer to a project over on N World, and have a great one. Dead Man's like midnight in Hawaii, and 7, 8, 9 p.m. Over towards Australia, New Zealand, area, that part of the world. So kind of awesome. I love it. I love it. Anyway, guys, you have a great one. I got to head off to work. I'll see you later. Peace. Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah. There you go, Red Dice. No worries. A welcome and entertaining distraction from crunching spreadsheets. Peace out. Peace. Yep. 8 a.m. in Nova Scotia. I apologize. Hey, Grable, have a great one. Mike, everybody, have a great one.